On September 25th, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force destroyer Sazana made its historic first crossing of the Taiwan Strait between Taiwan and China, accompanied by ships from Australia and New Zealand. The move immediately triggered protests from Beijing against Tokyo. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian said, "China remains highly vigilant about the political intentions of Japan's actions and has made stern representations to Japan. China has long claimed sovereignty over Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait." The Taiwan question, bearing on China's sovereignty and territorial integrity and the political foundation of China-Japan relations, is a red line that cannot be crossed. In response to the activities of Japan's self-defense force vessels entering the Taiwan Strait, the Chinese military has dealt with them in accordance with the relevant laws and regulations. How did Japan respond? The BBC Chinese website published an article on September 27th. The Japanese frigate passed through the Taiwan Strait for the first time. Relations between Japan and China seem to be getting tighter. The article said, "These crossing operations have highly political implications and are aimed at a signal to China that the United States and its allies do not accept Beijing's sovereignty claims. It is also another major shift for Tokyo in its long-standing policy of challenging China in an indirect manner." On September 26, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary also said that Japan had a strong sense of crisis after the Chinese People's Liberation Army frequently violated Japanese airspace. Why does Japan have a sense of crisis? On September 18th, Beijing dispatched an aircraft carrier for the first time to cross two Japanese islands close to Taiwan. On August 27th, the Chinese Y-9 reconnaissance aircraft entered Japanese airspace, and Japan immediately dispatched fighter jets. Japan considers it completely unacceptable and a serious violation of sovereignty. In response to the CCP's move, Zhang Feng, host of the Current Affairs Commentary channel, analyzed, "The one that invaded Japan this time was the U-9JB. It is a fully functional electronic reconnaissance aircraft. In addition to anti-submarine and intelligence collection, it also has electronic warfare functions such as electromagnetic suppression and interference. The main tactic they now use is to get close to Japan's coastal waters. When Japan finds that it activates its air defense radar and command communication mechanism, and at the same time fighter planes and early warning aircraft take off, the key data of these combat units were collected by the Yunjue electronic reconnaissance aircraft, including ground radar, the electromagnetic spectrum of the air defense missile system you activated, and communication data between the aircraft and the tower will be collected." In addition, Japan's Kagoshima, as the base camp of the southwest main island, is the location of important bases for the US and Japan. It is the US-Japan Joint Command Center established by the latest US-Japan treaty. In the past, this command center was located on Hawaii Island, but now it has been moved to Japan. This has made the Communist Army eager to obtain key command and communication data from the command center. So this data cannot be achieved simply by sending a formation to travel around the island like in previous years. Only military actions with strong political overtones such as airspace violations can trigger alarms from the US and Japan at the same time, and even a reaction from Taiwan. This is the real purpose of the CCP's entry into Japanese airspace this time. The Taiwan Strait is about 180 kilometers long. The US and Taiwan both say that it's a key shipping and trade route. About half of the world's container ships pass through it. The waters are international and open to all warships. However, the Beijing government disagrees, claiming that democratically governed Taiwan is its own territory and that only China has sovereignty and jurisdiction over the strait. For decades, the US Pacific Fleet was the only foreign navy to transit the strait regularly. Recently, however, Canada, Australia, the UK, and France have also begun to join the effort. 2 weeks ago, 2 German naval ships transited the Taiwan Strait for the first time in 22 years. On September 13th, the Chinese military criticized Germany's crossing of the strait for increasing regional security risks, but Berlin said its actions were in line with international standards. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said in a speech in Berlin, "International waters are international waters, and that is why we are passing through the Taiwan Strait."
Ja.
Yes, I can confirm that. The message is very simple, one that we have always stood up for and one I always stood up for. International waters are international waters. It's the shortest and, given the weather conditions, the safest route. So, we are passing through. So what did China say? Let's listen to what Wu Qian, the spokesperson of the Chinese Ministry of National Defense, said. People's Liberation Army Eastern Theater Command deployed forces on the sea and in the air to track and monitor the German warships the entire duration. Freedom of navigation doesn't mean freedom of trespassing, and still less can it be an excuse for acts of provocations or undermining China's sovereignty and security. Chinese troops will stay on high alert at all times, take strong and effective measures to foil any provocation attempt, and resolutely safeguard China's national sovereignty and territorial integrity, and safeguard peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Why did a German warship transit the Taiwan Strait despite China's strong objections? Deutsche Welle published a report titled German Language Media, a Signal Long Overdue. The article said, since the crossing operation will make Beijing unhappy, why not give up the crossing operation in order to maintain harmonious relations? The answer is, crossing the Taiwan Strait is a must in the context of Beijing's ongoing attempts to change international law. Simply put, China seeks the final say over this vital shipping lane, i.e. overturning existing international laws. In view of this, the German frigate's passage through the Taiwan Strait was not just to send a signal to China about the importance of defending freedom of navigation to Germany. Moreover, this trip also declares Germany's determination to defend existing international law. At the same time, Welt, a weekly newspaper, also commented, the German warship's passage through the Taiwan Strait shows that the turn of the times in the German government's foreign policy is not just a slogan, because maintaining peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region is also in line with Germany's own interests. It's generally believed that once control of the Taiwan Strait is handed over to China, the consequences will be more serious than the Russia-Ukraine war and the Middle East crisis combined. Therefore, Germany will also be severely affected. The Taiwan Strait is related to the International Order of Freedom and Democracy. After all, 45% of global trade passes through the Taiwan Strait, and 90% of the modern chips needed for Germany's laptops, mobile phones, high-tech products, and weapons come from Taiwan. Once the supply chain is blocked or China blocks the Taiwan Strait, the entire world cannot obtain a life-and-death product, chips. Once a war breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, the global economy will be paralyzed, and the two major powers, China and the US, and their respective allies will be at war with each other. In January 2024, Bloomberg said, the war over Taiwan will cause economic losses of approximately 10 trillion. This is equivalent to 10% of the global economy. The Russo-Ukrainian war or the coronavirus pandemic will pale in comparison. There is another incident that has attracted international attention. That is, 44 years later, on the eve of the 75th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China, the Chinese Communist Rocket Force conducted an intercontinental ballistic missile test on September 25th. This launch not only attracted widespread attention from the international community, but also revealed the Chinese Communist Party's intention to demonstrate its international strategic deterrence through military means. The missile was launched from Zhangjiang, Guangdong, China, flew over the Philippines, and finally landed near French Polynesia in the Pacific. Its range covered the mainland of the US and Guam. Experts analyzed that although the Chinese Ministry of National Defense defined the launch as routine military training, the political, military, and diplomatic intentions behind it cannot be ignored. The intercontinental ballistic missile launch tests that we have organized to test the performance of weapons and equipment and the training level of our troops are routine military training activities that are entirely legitimate and reasonable. China's nuclear policy has a high degree of stability, continuity, and predictability. So what is the purpose of the Beijing government's ballistic missile test? On September 26, the BBC published an article titled, For the first time in more than 40 years, what does it mean for China to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean? It explained the reason. The launch heightened tensions in the Indo-Pacific region because it highlighted China's growing long-range nuclear capabilities. The United States warned last year that China had expanded its nuclear arsenal as part of a defense upgrade. The range of intercontinental ballistic missiles can exceed 5,500 kilometers, allowing China's strike range to cover the continental US and the state of Hawaii. This is another wake-up call for the US and its allies in the region. For Washington, direct intervention in conflicts in the Taiwan Strait would expose the US mainland to attack. For US allies in Asia, the provocative tests demonstrated China's ability to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. Zhu Ziyun, director of the Strategy and Resources Institute of the National Defense and Security Research Institute of Taiwan, also said that China's intention to demonstrate politically through military oppression and gray zone operations is obvious. Dongfeng 41 used to be test-fired inland, that is, from the eastern region of the Communist Party of China to Xinjiang. It was a relatively vertical height because these missiles can use this height or horizontal distance to measure their overall performance. If it goes to the Pacific Ocean this time, the range should be more than 10,000 kilometers so that the performance of the Dongfeng 41 can be tested at a relatively large distance. While testing the technology, of course, it also has the intention of political demonstration. Mark, the host of the military channel Maritime in Space, also believes that the CCP's actions constitute the so-called nuclear threat. Although nuclear weapons are said to be relatively powerful, on the other hand, once used, both parties may die together. Therefore, no country, including Russia, would dare to use this easily. So far, I think it does not even dare to use tactical nuclear weapons. It even dares not to use such strategic nuclear weapons. Therefore, to say that I think the CCP is a threat, I can only show that I have this first. But will people care? It's another story. According to a report released by the U.S. Department of Defense in October 2023, the Chinese Communist authorities are rapidly developing nuclear weapons stockpiles. By 2030, China may have more than 1,000 combat warheads, roughly twice as many as now. Lin Yingyu, a Chinese military expert at the Institute of International Affairs and Strategy at Tom Kong University in Taiwan, told the BBC, "On the eve of China's National Day, Zhang Nenhai's test launch is a move that hopes to counter the various doubts about the rocket force from the outside world in recent years, and rumors to demonstrate the strength of the rocket force." So is China's rocket force really as powerful as Xi Jinping hopes? Let's have a discussion. China has invested heavily in the military to achieve Xi Jinping's goal of modernizing it by 2027. Xi also elevated the rocket force to a core position so that once Taiwan is attacked by force, the rocket force will surely play a key role. However, 2 years ago, the U.S. Military Research Department published the detailed deployment of the Chinese rocket force on the internet, with specific address coordinates. These security holes within the rocket force, as well as the serious corruption in the entire defense industrial base, make Xi Jinping restless. The U.S. assessment cited several examples to illustrate the consequence of corruption, including filling missiles with water instead of fuel and having manhole covers of the missile silo at the western base that cannot be opened and closed effectively. All this makes Xi Jinping think that strict rectification must be carried out, otherwise his national defense plan will be ruined. In the past year, anti-corruption investigations have directly led to the purge and dismissal of senior officials, including the resignation or death of Liu Chao, Li Shangfu, and others. Not only has the rocket force been purged, but Xi has also implemented large-scale purges in the Army, Air Force, Navy, aerospace, and other fields. Although this purge was intended to strengthen the military's discipline and loyalty, it caused panic within the military, seriously affecting the combat capability of the Chinese army. As Xi's iconic army, the rocket force's performance in recent years is directly related to Xi's political image. Frequent safety failures in the rocket force's long-range rocket launch system have caused Xi's disgrace. This also prompted Xi to use this rare long-range missile test to prove that the military is still stable and reliable, and to try to restore the outside world's confidence in its military control. Despite this, there are widespread doubts about whether the rocket force is really capable.